So once you've kind of got a good setup, you're ready to go, and you've looked at them. We've gone over contact sheets, which I'm going to start handing back to people as they bring them in, and you've got your photographs kind of set up. Here's a couple things that I'm just going to go through the process here and there's a couple different pieces of it that I think are really important. And I'm going to add a new camera raw thing for you guys to look at too. That's going to be really important. We'll use this one for that. So one of the first things that I recommend you do is you've got your folder here, which you've called HDR Project or Project number 4, whatever. It doesn't really matter. I recommend that you right-click in here and, well, you got to not click on it. Okay, so right-click on the folder here, and you can create a new folder in there. And I recommend once you've got the contact sheets printed out, you are going to set them up in sets. Set 1, set 2, whatever you want to do. Okay, so right-click, new folder, set 2. Okay, right-click, new folder, set 3. You get the idea. Okay, and then just take what you've got, highlight them all, and drag them into sets. And the reason why I think this is a good thing to do, because normally I would say don't do this, and actually you shouldn't do this until after you've rated everything, you know which ones you're going to do, then I recommend that you do this, but only after, okay, you've got everything set up here. So yep, that's set 3. Also make sure you don't drag more than one set into a set. Set 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so I got 6 sets. So once I've done this, okay, now I've lost track of how many I put in. Okay, so I don't have anything in set 4 yet, but I do have something in set 3. Okay, just making sure. So then I'll just drag these into set 4, drag these into set 5, drag these into set 6. Okay, so now I've got them separated into sets like this. And then what I would do, and I only copied like the best images that I've been seeing you guys do, okay, really, just a couple, is I'd also make a new folder, and I would call it extras or something like that. And then I'd throw all my other photographs in there, okay? But what you're going to find is when we start to bring these into Photoshop, it's going to help you immensely if they're in folders by sets like this. Because Photoshop's going to ask you to highlight the images that you want to bring in, and it's really much easier if they're in their own little folders. So let's see here. So let's go to, let's actually do, I think, set 6. Yeah, we're going to do set 6 here because I want to show you a couple of things. So the first thing that you should do is once you've got them all set up, is you're going to highlight them all by holding the Shift key down. We're going to open them in Camera Raw. Now once you got them in Camera Raw, one of the first things I told you to do is make sure that the color balance is all the same. So I'm going to take a look at my normal exposure here, which is this one right here, 4800. That looks good. Make sure that all of them are on 4800 just so the color balance is the same. And the tint should be approximately the same too. If it's off by 1 point, it's not going to really do anything, but I think it's really important to have the color balance the same. That way you're really not dealing with major shifts in the colors between shots. I've seen certain people's, especially the underexposed shots, been as much as almost 1,000 degrees Kelvin difference in the color balance, and that can really mess things up. So that's number 1. Number 2, we're going to deal with something new, and this is very helpful here. What you're going to do is you're going to take the magnifying glass and you're going to look especially at objects in the back here. See if you guys can see this. We're going to zoom in really tight on this, okay? And if you're looking very carefully, and you know what, if you look at my monitor, maybe you can see it better. So everybody just turn around. Can you see this kind of turquoisey green line coming down here, the cyan line coming down the side here, and then see the little magenta here? That's what we call chromatic aberrations. And that happens a lot on objects that are in backgrounds when you've got a cheaper lens. sorry, but the cameras that I have that I let you guys borrow are not the most expensive lenses in the world. To be honest with you, chromatic aberration happens with almost any lens. I'm honestly really impressed that this is all we have out of this lens is this little red cyan issue. You can actually correct that in the Camera Raw settings. So another reason why we like to use Camera Raw, right here is a lens correction tab. And it will start with this profile, okay? And you can try and say, well, I've got this make a camera or lens and model and profile, all that sort of stuff. And you could get into that. We're not going to go there. We're just going to go to manual, and we're not going to be worried about any of this, although you can do a ton of cool stuff with this. By the way, if you're photographing buildings and they're keystoning, like they've got the vertical perspective, you can try and shift that a little bit. There's a lot of fun stuff you can do. Actually, let me just show you. Let me back out here. So you can do perspective shifts, okay, to try and get rid of changes in the perspective that have happened with you tilting the lens up at a tall building. Rounded distortion. So if you've got a real wide angle lens that has a tendency to bend the corners, you can try and get rid of that. There's an amazing amount of really cool corrections that you can do. But of course, doing stuff like this, you'll notice, first things off, you're going to have to zoom in and crop, okay? So you are talking about degrading the image a little bit here by doing this. So it's better, of course, to take the perfect shot, obviously. But what we really want to take a look at is these two controls here, red cyan fringe and blue yellow fringe. And we're just going to zoom in here on the background, and we're going to look for those kinds of fringes. And we can see we've got cyan and we've got red right here. So now if I push them in one direction, you can see them get worse. See that? Now you can really see the fringe. But if I go the opposite direction, very subtly, I can get rid of those edge colors that are there. The reason why this is really important with HDR is because as we start to enhance the colors with HDR, those will actually pop out, especially if they're in multiple photographs. If that fringe chromatic aberration is in multiple images, you may not see it unless you zoom in on this image. But when you start putting layer upon layer together, all of a sudden that becomes really apparent later on in the process. So that's the first thing. So you just want to do that with each image. So you can just click on that and just zoom in here. And the chromatic aberration will change for every image. So don't think that you can just hit the same number and have it done. The reason why it changes is a couple of reasons. If you change the aperture, as the size of the aperture changes, that will change how the light bends through the lens. You can get more or less chromatic aberration depending upon how small the aperture is. Believe it or not, a smaller aperture a lot of times actually makes the aberrations worse because the light is bending more through the lens. I've actually gotten photographs where I've done high magnification and literally nothing. I mean, no colors were there, and then all of a sudden I stopped down, I took the aperture all the way to its smallest, and I took the photograph, and then all of a sudden, like, millions of colors just sprung up out of nowhere because it was just a chromatic aberration through the lens at high magnification. Obviously here, we don't have a lot of red turquoise fringe, right? Nope, wrong. If you zoom in, you can see it right there. So if you don't see it right away, it doesn't mean that it's not there. You know, you can obviously go too far with it, but they're still there. So you want to check those aberrations. Look for places in your image where you see the aberrations. Zoom in really close with the magnifying glass tool. Now to zoom out, by the way, you just hold the Option key down, and that gives you the minus magnify tool, and you can now click out and zoom out. So let's just do our last one here, and then let's put this image together. I think you guys will like it. So there we go. Now I've got all the chromatic aberrations taken care of. And I'm just focusing here because I knew that I could see them there and they were pretty obvious. But you could use the space bar to get the hand tool, and you should zoom around your lens and zoom around the photograph and just make sure that the lens correction really is working all the way around, okay? You should make a good inspection of everything. Once we've got the corrections done in Camera Raw, we're actually going to click Done, okay? And there are my 5 images, and they've, you know, had some changes. I haven't changed exposure, all that sort of stuff. Now comes the fun part. So what we're going to do is now we're going to go into Photoshop. And I'm going to go into the File menu, okay? And go File, and then down here you'll see this one called Automate. And in Automate, you'll see Merge to HDR Pro. Now, let me just say something about this. This isn't the best HDR merging program I've ever seen. There are several good ones available for download out on the internet. I forget which one everybody considers is the best. I always use Photoshop. I think it's good enough. You have more control in some of the other ones that cost about, they're not too expensive. If you really like this, it's well worth it. I think they're about 90 bucks, $100. So if you really love doing this, that's well worth spending the money on it. But if you've already got Photoshop like we do, we're going to use this plugin. I'm not humongously enamored with this, but it works, and it works pretty well. So I'm going to click on Merge to HDR Pro, and it's going to ask me to find my images. And this is why I think it's good for you to put your images in sets. Because if you've got them all in one place, it's kind of hard to find them. But I've got them here. So now I'm going to go to the Open, and I'm going to go Pen Media. And instead of Media Students, obviously, I'm going to go to Media Staff. Okay? But you go to Media Students. And I put them in my Demo Files folder. And I put them in Photoshop. And there's my HDR Project. And crap, what set was I doing? I forget now. I was on, let's go to the bridge really quickly, set 6. Okay, so we're going to put set 6 together first. So set 6, and then I can highlight them all, just like that. Okay, all readable documents, and open. I got them all listed here, and it's kind of cool that I've got the bridge in the background. I can just double check my file names and everything. Yep, that looks good. Now this is important. Attempt to automatically align source images. I think you should have that checked on all the time. Okay. Even some of you who are using tripods, I notice that some of you bump the tripods as you're going through this process. That's normal, especially with these crappy lightweight tripods that I had for you guys. You know, if you had a good heavy-duty tripod, that's a lot less likely to happen. Doesn't mean it still doesn't happen, just less likely. So just make sure that's checked on and click OK. And here we go. So now it's thinking, and it's going to open each image, okay, and then it's going to kind of disappear really quickly and go through and initialize stuff. And it does take a second here to import everything. Okay, it takes a little bit more than just a second. It takes a little longer than that. But it's going to open all your images. It's going to pull them in, and then it's going to open up a new dialog box. And this is pretty cool. And I'm going to show you some of the presets that we have and all that. So let's just be patient here and wait a second. Wow, it's really thinking on this one a lot. Not sure what's going on here. So when you see the process come up, like crop, okay, what it's doing there is it's noticing that one of the images was maybe a little off, so it had to crop them a little bit, move one over. So it's really doing a lot of stuff for you. That's pretty cool. Now, here we go. So here we've got our 6 images listed along the bottom, okay? And you'll notice, this is really cool, by the way, you'll notice here that it's lined them up based on EV plus and minus. So it says EV 0, EV plus 97, which is 1 stop basically, minus a stop, minus 1.36 stops. It's interesting that it registers this at 1.36. So apparently this person didn't go full -2. But that's okay, because you know what? This is such a dark image, I think that it probably will work out better that way. And then you have plus 2.97 here, so that's +3, and then +2, and then +1. So no big deal, but it just shows you what you got. Now here comes the fun. Up here we have presets. Now these presets here in this drop-down menu, okay, they're going to give you a different look for each one. And then they're going to, basically what they do is each one of them is a preset that changes all these settings that you have here, okay? What I like to do is I like to go through the presets, get to a point that I like a certain look, and then I'll start playing with the presets a little bit more to fine-tune it. So I'm looking at this image, and automatically you guys should really see this right now, even just with the immediate custom preset. This is such a better image than what you would have if you just shot the normal. So if I go back to bridge and I open up just the normal the zero exposure one, which is this one, okay? Let's just do that really quickly, okay? Take a look here at your shadows. See, shadows are all blocked up. Your sky is kind of a light blue, but it's fading. You don't have a ton of detail here. Now let's go back to Photoshop really quickly, and it's not quite as big, but take a look here. I can zoom in. Take a look at the detail that you've got now here in your shadows, okay, with the bushes here, and then look at the detail you've got right here. Whereas in the normal, this was all lost, essentially. You've got a nice highlight here, but you also got detail in the glass and stuff that would be normally lost. I mean, this is just a much better image, just even without fooling with it at all. It's a better image because it's just got better tonal range. But with HDR, of course, we can do much better than that. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to go, and we can start playing with this. So let's just go more saturated, see what happens. Whoa. Okay. Obviously, just makes a crazy image that's probably way more than we want. But you can see as you change these presets, watch these controls and see what they do. You'll notice that over here on our color, our saturation and our vibrance are almost pegged. Okay? But if we pull those back a little bit, okay, you can see how things start to become a little less, you know, over the top. Take our vibrance down a little bit too. And you know, and then what you also notice on this, you'll see this little edge glow here. There's literally controls for the edge glow right there that you can start playing with. Take the radius down a little bit, maybe take the strength down a little bit, okay? And that's going to change the way that it looks. Let's try a different one. Let's try surrealistic. Okay, yeah, that's a little too much for me. Surrealistic low contrast. That's awful. What were they thinking? Why would you? Anyway, surrealistic high contrast, no thanks. How about photo? To be honest with you, most of the time, I go with photorealistic, and then I start making some changes from here. So here you'll see the edge glows in the medium, but the radius is low. I'll bring the edge glow up a little bit, okay? Which kind of pumps up the contrast. I can take the detail down a little or up a little. That will increase. And then here's your two most, this is your two most powerful controls right here in my mind. The shadow and the highlight. And the gamma is actually pretty powerful too. But see here, we've kind of lost our shadow details. So I'm going to take the shadow details up. See, as I start to slide the slider up, see the shadows get lighter. But here's what's cool about this. Because we're blending all these exposures, if you just lightened your shadows in Photoshop with one shot, they'd go gray, okay? But here, instead, and you wouldn't have detail, it would just be a flat gray all the way across. But because we've got multiple exposures, you actually increase your detail, or not increase you, but you keep your detail while lightening your shadows, okay? And then I can increase the brights of the highlights, okay, to maybe add a little contrast, or I can bring them way down, and the image can become looking a little flat. But that is still that's so much more of a dynamic image than what we had before. So then when you're ready, you just click OK. And it's going to create the file. So now it's going to merge them all together. And it creates a new file that's on one layer. And now what I would do, once this is done, is now I'd go in and I would do layer adjustments on certain portions. So I might want to make the yellow flowers a little brighter, okay? So I would bump them up with the saturation or a color balance image adjustment layer and then mask out everything else. I'm not quite sure what was going on there, okay? So there's still more adjustments to do, and we'll go more into those later. So now once I've got this, I need to go save as, because I haven't saved this yet. So then I'm going to go and I'm going to put them in, and I'm going to put it right with the others, okay? Photoshop, HDR, and this was set 6 if I remember correctly. And so I'll just call this set6 HDR.PSD. Okay, let's do one more really quickly because I wanted to show you something else in this. So I'm going to go over back into Bridge here, and I'm going to grab, there was one with water that was done here. Let me see if I can get this, because this one's, yep, oh, look at that, set 5. All right, so I'm going to go to Photoshop. I'm not going to mess around with the lens, the chromatic aberrations and stuff. I just want to bring this in and show it to you. So I always go to Import, Automate, Merge to HDR Pro, Browse. We're going to go into set 5. And I'm just going to bring all those in and click OK. It's going a little faster this time, it looked like. Maybe. That's what happened. You see, I spoke too soon. It's probably... if you bump the camera a little bit or something, it's probably figuring that out. But this is good. Once you see all these layers pop in here, that means you're almost ready. It's almost open. These are fast computers too, so this tells you how much processing it takes, by the way. And these are old Rebels. These Rebels are only 8 megapixel Rebels. So, I mean, imagine if you had the new, or maybe they're 10s, but imagine if you had like a 22 megapixel camera on Camera Raw, how much longer this would take. I mean, it still takes pretty decent. So here we go. Let's just, I'm just going to go to photorealistic here, and you can have a lot of fun with the edge glow and stuff like that. Again, don't go too crazy with things. I mean, it's, you know, you really can go a little too nuts with it. But what I wanted to show you was one last thing here, and that's the water reflection is really cool, but you'll notice that it looks a little, I don't know, it's like it's still. And if you were to go back and look at each individual shot in Bridge, okay, and zoom in here, you'll notice, okay, that we have these water ripples. See that? They're gone. And the reason for that is because in Photoshop it's blending all the layers together, and so we've lost our a lot of our water ripples. If there are things that have been moving in your image, trees waving around, water rippling, something like that, usually you can get rid of it pretty nicely by going up here to remove ghosts. Watch this when I check this. It's thinking. Boom. Now you get your ripples back. See that? Okay. It just chooses the best exposure for that area and then just gets that from one photograph and one photograph only. It's very handy. It works most of the time. Now, sometimes it doesn't work really well. If it weren't to work really well, what might be a possible solution for you? Anybody think? Click OK, build the image, then go back to one of your originals, open the original Camera Raw file in, and then copy and paste the thing back in on top of your HDR. That would really be a good option for you. So, you know, that would be a lot more work, but it is possible. But you can kind of see, I mean, the amount of again, detail that's in here is just gorgeous. And you have so much, I mean, control over your shadows, so I can lift my shadows up over here and really get more detail into those darker areas in here and everything. I mean, and that's one of the most beautiful parts of this is the ability to grab details in the shadows that you just never would be able to do before. And then, you know, play with your highlights a little bit, because you don't want to lose contrast, too much contrast, but you also don't want to lose detail in the highlights either. So it's push and pull, and you kind of play with it a little bit. And then you know what? If you go too far, if you screwed it up completely, then you just go back and you choose photorealistic or whatever preset that you chose in the beginning and kind of start all over again. But you don't start all over again. You just start with your preset again and start playing with it. It's going to take you a little bit of time to get used to it, but at the same time, once you start learning what these controls will do, okay, then it really, really helps. And let me just go over. The edge glow literally does an edge glow around edges. So if I bump this all the way up, you're going to see a pretty massive change. And you can see that little glow around the trees and stuff like that. And here, that's edge glow. The gamma controls the contrast. So if you go to the right, it flattens the image out. Yuck. You go to the left, it makes it more contrasty. But the problem with that is you will start to lose some details. So just be mindful of that. Usually the gamma is really good in the middle. And then I will increase contrast by playing with the highlights and the shadows. The detail literally controls the sharpness. So it will sharpen areas. See that? Which also has the way, it kind of increases contrast, but it does it in a weird way. It's going along the edges of the photograph to increase contrast. It can create a pretty cool look, but you want to be careful with it because you can go way too far with it very easily. And then the shadows, I already explained that. You lift up the shadows, that gives you more detail in shadows, lightens them up a little bit, and the same thing with the highlight slider. And then the vibrance, okay, and the saturation. The saturation obviously just does what it says. It increases that saturation. The vibrance actually goes beyond that and makes the colors almost not even realistic. It almost like posterizes them. That's weird, but it puts them into a surreal, more of a surreal type tone. The saturation saturates the tones as they are. So it uses the same colors, it just makes them more saturated. The vibrance literally changes the colors to kind of make them, it pushes them more towards a pure color is really what it is. So your blues become more of a pure blue and so on and so forth. You'll lose a lot in the vibrance. I like to play with the saturation more and leave the vibrance down in the middle somewhere, okay? But obviously you can go the other route and put the saturation and the vibrance down and you've got a monochromatic HDR image, which can look really interesting too. There's no right or wrong here, okay? I just want you to play with the controls, okay? So that's what those basically do. We're also going to keep the mode set to 16-bit. That's good. It's in the middle. That gives you the good average of colors. And we're going to keep the adaptation to local. Although if you want to play with, these, you can, but essentially it gives you less control with those. So I like local adaptation that gives you all of those little sliders. And that's what the default is, so you should just stick with that. Any questions? No? I like what I see as I was looking through the contact sheets that I got yesterday, so I'm very pleased with this. I think you guys are going to be pleased once you start getting your final images. So good job, and let's go to work.